that is, again, someone who is comfortable with UFOs, and those ideas would describe it in that way. Someone who is more comfortable or more connected with the idea of paranormal phenomena would describe it in those terms.
Right. So do you do a lot of work with UFOs, though, or is that just something you find interesting?
That is my husband.
Oh, okay.
Yes, my whole life has been the paranormal. I would be one of those people that would see a gray, and I would wonder, well, was I seeing a shadow figure? That's probably how I would describe it. I will tell you, he's really interesting. He's very well versed in UFOs, and I have learned quite a bit from him. But there was an incident. I am an astral projector. That's how I get a lot of my information when I am connecting with someone for a psychic reading. Often I have something called I call a 360. It's astral projection into the past, maybe a different location or a different time in their life, and I'm able to bring back information and share that with them. So I woke up one night, and it was interesting. I knew I was astral projecting immediately because I looked over at the door. I was able to see, even though I really couldn't move my physical body, my eyes were able to see that I was above the door. And, I could see just a crack of light coming through it. And I was trying to look to my right where my husband sleeps. And I heard my spirit guide say, "Don't look to the right." And I could see these small beings. I mean, I could see them, because I was able to see the door, so I was able to see the shadows at the end of the bed. And the next morning, I told my husband about it, and he said, "Well," he said, "you do remember that's the side of the bed I sleep on, right?" I said, "Yes, honey. I'm sorry, when I'm told not to look, I don't make any further attempt to do that." So it's really interesting to have someone in the household who's so comfortable with paranormal phenomena, and then you have someone who's very knowledgeable and comfortable with this whole idea of UFOs and with aliens and stepping through dimensions, which I also believe in. I do believe that that's often how we astral project or astral travel is, of course, through dimensions. My husband and I were doing an exercise once. It was so cute, and it shows different ways of doing things. And we were trying to make it to a certain location, if you will, and we're talking to each other as we're doing it. And my husband said, "I'm in the sky now. I can see planets." And he said, "Where are you?" I said, "I'm there." It's like, for me, it's like, boom, it's just like you're there. I don't know how to describe it. It's just like time and space right out of Dune, the movie Dune, compresses. And I walk through that door where he goes about it in a very different way. And so not to negate anyone's experience. And that's why I always raise an eyebrow when someone talks about being an expert or a guru or et cetera, in the paranormal or the UFO field, is because we know so little about it. And just because one soul is able to travel time and distance in one way and another way does not negate the experience of either.
Right. And I completely agree. It's like whenever anyone says that they're an expert, you need to run the other way. So.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Let me tell you, this is a true story. I get people who want me to be a guru. And there's a difference between being a guru and being a teacher. A teacher shares information.
Right.
But I actually had this couple recently. I mean, this happens all the time, but they wanted to pay me to connect them basically to divine source, because that's the source of everything. And I'm like, no, you can do that yourself. And here's how you need to do that. And another thing, and I know I'm going to get killed for this, so I'm preparing myself now, but that is, I had this young woman come to me, and she said, "I want to be a medium." One of the gifts I have is I can tell someone's energy. I can tell what they're gifts truly are. And I actually started a troupe of psychics and mediums called the Full Moon Caravan. We've since broken in beautifully into two different groups, but each one of those young women, I was able to tell them what their gift would be, and they've connected with that. I mean, extraordinarily well. But anyway, did I answer that? I will tell you and your listeners, I have ADD, attention deficit disorder. I don't have hyper activity with that, which is very common, but it is one of the markers that they are looking at in connection to psychic ability, because one of the gifts, in fact, they call it a blessing and a curse. The gift that we are given, those of us with ADD, is our minds. Like, I am literally here with you, but I may be, thinking what's going to happen, an hour from now or a day from now. A lot of people describe it as most of the population is looking at one television, while someone with ADD is looking at 100 at once. And that's why we make excellent detectives and people who are able to solve puzzles, that sort of thing. It's a gift that we do have. Another connection with psychic ability that they are studying is, of course, blood type. Rh negative blood type is in less than 14% of the world's population, or right at 14%, which is extraordinary. And of course, in ethnic groups, it's higher in some, like in Ireland, it's very high with 18%. Of course, the Basque region between Spain and France, they have they think that that's really where Rh negative bloodline originated, and it's extraordinarily high there. My blood type is Rh negative. So you look at all these things, and then you can look at astrological charts. My Scorpio is in Neptune, or Neptune in Scorpio. I'm not an astrologer. My very good friend Tara Overbright Bryant is a brilliant astrologer and has done my chart. What it means is that is a sign of a medium. There's all these markers when you really start looking at psychics and psychic abilities that may or may not across the board be viable markers. But it's interesting, the study that is occurring, and I'm very happy about that.
Okay. Well, we already had a question for you.
All right.
When did let me phrase that. When did you realize you had the gift of astral projection?
Oh, this is like a lot of people like me. Another marker that I failed to mention is we often get our gifts through our DNA. Through the bloodline. And if you think about the holy books, I mean the Bible, it talks about the blood quite a bit, and of course the importance of bloodlines. That's why we have such a focus in royalty on that's why they were so interbred, so to speak, for so long, because they wanted to keep the bloodline pure. But my point is, when I was a small child, my very first memory, I was about 3.5 years old. My father was in the military. He was actually in the Air Force, and we were in Alaska, where he was stationed. And I am sitting up in bed, and it's early in the morning. It's in that twilight time of Alaska, where it's just twilight all the time. And I'm sitting there, and I'm watching my mother float into the room. And she floats over to her body, and I'm watching her, and now I'm totally confused. And it was such a memory. I mean, we all have that one memory, that first memory. That was mine. And I watched her body kind of float into her, or her spirit float into her body. So that was my first connection with that. As far as my own connection, very early, about 5 or 6 years old, I actually had 2 spirit guides who guided me, which was really cool. It was a man and a woman. And one night I'm laying there, and I'm bored. You have to understand, I'm at that point in Texas. My father is generations Texan. So he had gotten out of the military, and we were back in Texas. And it doesn't get dark there until 10 o'clock. And my mother was a big 6:30 or 7 o'clock to put the children to bed. So I'm laying there in bright sunlight. And I'm like, I'm going to die before I go to sleep. I've always been kind of an insomniac, even as a child. And all of a sudden, I heard my spirit guide say, "You're bored. Just look at the painting." And so I looked at this painting that was in the room. It's kind of a famous painting of, it shows this amazing tree. It shows fairies. It shows all these beautiful animals, and they're all dancing around the tree. And so I'm staring at the tree, and the tree goes 3D. I mean, this is before, I'm sure scientists or futurists were already thinking about that, but in my world, way back then, it wasn't. So I watched these 3D characters, and they're singing and they're dancing, and it's just this whole idea of being connected, I guess, with the ether, with the other. My first experience that I remember is I was fascinated, and still am, by Greek and Roman mythology, which, when you look at certain things like this, it often harkens back to past lives. So I have a dream, and I dream that I am at the Parthenon, and I can feel it. I can smell it. It's like I'm half awake and half asleep. It was, very profound for me, and it was my first true experience with astral projection.
Okay. So, do you believe that there are genetic markers for certain abilities then?
I think, yes. I think probably the blood is one of them. When you have Rh negative blood, it's not cluttered up as much with like proteins. And so one of the explanations that they have is, if there's vibration, and any new age person, and I've seen people roll their eyes about this, but they'll talk about vibration, raise your vibration. But it's really about oscillation. When you think about it, what I love about science is it more and more proves the reality of what physicians are, people like myself have known, and that is that there is so much more than just the solid, 2D, sometimes 3D surroundings that we live in. For instance, if you look at a table, and you remember 8th grade science, they will tell you, your teacher, that there's more space between the atoms that make up that table than the table itself. And there's electrons, there's neutrons, and what do these things do? They oscillate. Energy. It's all in everything is energy. And I think that there are people like myself and many others that are connected to energy in a different way. We're more open to it. We feel it. For somebody who's empathic, somebody can come into the room sick, and they'll immediately know that. They don't even have to be looking at the person. They'll feel that lack of energy, or that sickness in that person. If somebody's very depressed, and usually, I shouldn't say usually, but many times the most jovial person in the room is the one that is the saddest, or maybe covering up depression, et cetera, et cetera. An empath can detect that right away. I mean, it's about energy. For someone like me, it's astral projection. It's more than that, though. It's connecting with energy of all kinds. For instance, someone who's passed, that's a different kind of energy. And I always tell people that I might connect with something that's decided to stay in a location. But if this is your father or your aunt or your sister or whomever it may be, and you are wanting me to speak with them, it is your energy. You are the reason that they are here. I am the communicator. I am a vessel. I know you've heard that expression before, but it's very true. So what I do is I can see or I can hear, and then I relay messages. And by the way, for any of you who have ever